was the sort of dimly lit, mid-century style bar that was too classy for me by half. In the real world, it's the kind of place I'd go to grab some drinks, but that was back in the old days. Back when there was still a studio to foot the bill. Thankfully, here inside the simulation, money was of no concern. But it wasn't just the promise of synthetic inebriation that led me through Roxy's neon entrance that night. It was a name. A name I'd stared at in the user list. It can't be him, I thought. The cringe that followed could not be stifled. All I could do was avert my gaze to the ebony hardwood floor and let the involuntary expression run its course. When I unbuttoned my face, there he was, sitting at the bar. Mad Cow. I waved away my holographic display. The translucent overlay of usernames, locations, and notes shrunk and vanished into my peripheral. What remained was my old lead programmer, wearing a cow print suit and fedora. The infamous cow print suit and fedora looking as ugly as it was expensive. Yes. I approached close enough to be heard over the murmurs of other patrons. He spun around in the bar stool and sized me up behind a pair of ruby-tinted aviator glasses.
Tell me you don't look that old in real life.
Life comes at you fast. You, on the other hand. I gestured at his entire outfit. Are apparently 13 years old again. He scoffed and reached out to grab my hand. The handshake quickly became a pat on the back and then a full-blown hug. I hadn't seen Lucas, aka Mad Cow, in nearly 10 years. Already, memories were flooding back of never-ending crunch nights at Darkroom Entertainment, our game studio. It all seemed like a lifetime ago. I took a seat next to him and signaled the bartender.
What's the fun of living in a simulation if you don't peacock it up a bit? Have you even played with the closet options yet?
What's this about living in a simulation? I just work here. And when you got me this job, you didn't say I'd have to work with you.
You think I'd pass on this sort of opportunity just because
He stopped. But I could finish the thought for him, because I'm still a well-paid programmer with a career. The pause turned awkward until the bartender broke the silence.
Please try not to scare away my customers, Mad Cow.
1,000 pardons, Ms. Roxy. Say, could I convince you to whip up my usual and a gin and tonic for my colleague here?
What sort of work do the two of you do together?
We're quality assurance. We're probably the best paid beta testers in the world.
This world, at least. But that only earned me a slightly confused look from Roxy as she got to work mixing our drinks.
I've been giving her my own personal Turing test all evening.
I'll bet you have. I shook my head. You know, there's an easier way to tell if she's real. I waved my holographic display back on and pointed to the purple diamond that appeared over all simulated characters' heads in the overlay. A translucent box rolled out beside Roxy with her name and background information. I waved it away.
There's no fun in that. And I'm being serious. This sort of thing, this level of AI, she really is perfect. Everything here is, in case you haven't noticed. And do you know what the worst part is?
What's that?
The worst part is they didn't need me to code it. I always thought it would be you and I that built a place like this. At least we're still part of it, I suppose.
Roxy presented our drinks, garnished with lemon and sprigs of rosemary. Lucas took his with an appreciative nod and sipped.
How's the testing coming along on your end?
My reply was cut short by a crash of shattering glass. I spun around and saw the lounge table flipped on its side, the man convulsing on a floor. A woman rushed to his side, but he grabbed her arms, hurling her backwards. I set my drink down too hard, sloshing gin onto the bar. With my hand free, I flicked my overlay back on, confirming that the people were also human testers. Lucas was already on his feet, rushing over to help.
What happened?
He was fine a minute ago. Suddenly he thinks he's dying in real life? That I'm not actually real because I'm not feeling it too, I guess?
Sounds like ASS.
Ass? I blurted out.
No, idiot. Did you even read the forms they had us sign? Acute solipsism syndrome is a potential risk of total immersion.
Lucas knelt down beside the man, who was now shivering with his head propped uncomfortably against the leg of a lounge chair.
Hey buddy, you're going to be alright. You're not drowning, you're breathing just fine in real life. You're really here.
The text would be helping him if there was really a problem, I said to the other testers. It came out more like a question than a statement. They gulped and nodded. I saw a familiar face. Mara? Mara was sitting back at the bar. Her long dark hair framed a strange expression, something like pity, as she watched the commotion. I thought for sure she'd step in to help. The simulation was her project after all. But instead, she took what appeared to be a martini from Roxy and drank it in a single gulp. After that, she said something to Roxy I couldn't hear, stood up, and left.
You're really here. Try remembering how you got here.
Lucas reassured our colleague. I looked back at Mara's empty seat. Roxy was wiping down the counter. I felt a pit of unease settling in my stomach. Remember how you got here, I thought. The elevator ride was so long that I nodded off. I woke up startled, like I'd been falling, and shrank with embarrassment. If the other people packed into the freight car had noticed, they'd spared me any acknowledgement. The only one looking at me was my own bloodshot reflection in the elevator's chromed paneling. I looked like crap. Freaking jet lag. But how long had we been descending? I'd barely finished unpacking when the Foundation staff knocked on my door. They ushered me downstairs with the other prospective testers, into the basement of Mountain Lodge. From there, we boarded the elevator. It was minutes ago, but it felt like yesterday. I remembered the excruciating long load times in most of Darkroom's games. It became something of an inside joke to trap our players inside elevators as a new level was loading. It was a necessary evil to maintain the immersion. So, is this where you've hidden the loading screen? I said to break the ice. No response. Either these weren't gamers, or they were too jet-lagged past the point of zombification. Or maybe I'm just not funny.
No, that's much further down.
At least she looked to be well-rested. It's getting really cold, a man said. I realized I could see my breath and wrap my arms together.
Yes, so it has to be cold for the computers to function. That's why all the servers are kept so far underground. It saves the Foundation a fortune in maintenance and cooling costs.
When the doors opened, whatever was left of my grogginess vanished in a wave of awe. We stepped out into what felt at first like an infinite black void, punctuated with sharp points of white light. As my eyes adjusted, I could make out wires suspending the lamps from catwalks further above us. As bright and numerous as the lights were, they could barely scrape the volume of the massive underground cavern. Only the faintest impression of light reached the walls, just enough that I could discern the whirl of marbled stone in the distance. Up above the crisscross of man-made catwalks, the vaulted ceiling peaked in utter darkness.
Welcome to the bunker.
She beckoned us down a path of lampposts, further into the cavern. It looked as though someone had teleported the guts of some research facility deep into a mountain. Cold steel and concrete were fused to the natural stone with practicality that couldn't conceal the strange beauty of the caves. We passed through an imposing bulkhead door and across a bridge that spanned a lake of water, gleaming like black glass.
Good morning, testers. The time is now 8 a.m. on July 31st, 2053. FCI wishes you a productive day.
The Foundation really built this place?
Said a woman, awestruck.
Actually, people have been building this place for thousands of years. Ancient people explored these grottos and discovered their salt deposits. They mined it for centuries, all throughout the Dark Ages, until it was sealed.
Why was it sealed?
The records are unclear about that. What we do know is that the Soviet government excavated it to use as a fallout shelter in the event of nuclear war. After the Cold War, it was sealed again until we purchased it.
I followed along with the tour, wondering just who was investing so much capital in the Foundation for the sake of VR technology. Sure, we'd have loved to get our hands on it at Darkroom, but even at the height of our success, we were in no position to buy an underground Russian base. Something didn't add up. Still, the pay was on a scale barely fathomable to someone who teaches game design to college students. And there was something else, almost nostalgic. It felt like whatever this was, it was a chance to get in on the ground floor of the next new thing. We came at last to a second massive vault. Fluorescent lights shone through graded catwalks that ran above dozens of stainless steel cylinders, each of them barely larger than a person. The soft thrum of machinery reverberated throughout the room. Technicians scurried between computer terminals along the outer walls.
The first group has already been at it for a week. Have a look.
From atop the hallway, we could see down into the cylinders. Many were empty. The rest held people floating upright in some kind of liquid. They wore breathing masks, not unlike scuba regulators, and appeared to be unconscious.
The pods are total sensory deprivation. In that state, your brain could interpret sensory signals from the simulation as a genuine substitute for, well, what you're experiencing now.
Mara looked down at the occupied tanks.
They are in a whole other world now. The town we've constructed for you to test is just the beginning. There really is no limit to the worlds we can build.
We're probably already inside, a man mused. Everyone just slowly turned to him. Think of what we're on the threshold of here. If we can ever truly run simulations of reality, and there's only one true reality, then the odds are we're in some form of simulated reality right now. Someone objected, and the group seemed to explode immediately into deep philosophical debates on the topic. The term quantum Hall effect was spat back and forth quite a bit. I more or less capped out at high school physics and tuned the discussion out. I just stared at the half-naked people below. What have I got to lose? I thought.
You're watching Tales from the Multiverse. Only on Disrupt.
Okay, so get this, man. It's crazy. I know you won't believe me, but it's crazy. All right, I'm walking down the road, and all of a sudden, the sky just opens up, right? And this huge hand comes out and drops this tub in front of me. And at this point, I'm thinking, good Lord, I've finally gone off my rocker, right? But now, this tub of powder has a label on it called Gamer Subs. And what's even crazier is the day before, I was just hoping, right? I was hoping deep down inside that I had some keto-friendly, organic caffeine, energy solution with electrolytes, no fillers, and crucial vitamins to help stay in the zone, you know? Without the crash. And all of a sudden, by the grace of a divine presence, this product has been placed in front of me. A product made with targeted ingredients to help me stay in the zone while, working out, gaming, even editing my podcast. Have I told you about my podcast? It's about Sorry, what? Anyways, the giant hand in the sky then disappears, but not before telling me to tell you on the phone that we can use code DISRUPT for 10% off. Then it told me I may fall into a rift in the space-time continuum. There was no hell until we made it. It was what Mara said to Roxy. What do you make of that?
No idea. Want another drink?
I really should get back to work. I declined. I left Roxy's alone to continue my nighttime exploration. There were no rules to this job, per se. We just had to spend our time in this place however we saw fit and report any flaws in the experience. I decided that to give myself some structure, I would pace out the boundaries of the town. It was modeled as a quaint little resort settlement in the mountains. The streets outside Roxy's followed a bend around the edge of town. Storefronts faced a low cobblestone wall on the other side of the road. Beyond that, the hill sloped down into a procedurally generated forest of pine trees that stretched out to a foggy horizon. It was clearly based on real terrain, but the town itself was a work of fiction. I strolled from streetlight to streetlight, dragging my fingers along the rough texture of the stone wall. A mild breeze rustled the silhouettes of the trees. I closed my eyes and breathed in the fresh, evergreen scent. Suddenly, sharply, the breeze became uncomfortably cold. Some primal sense told me to snap out of the daydream. Something was wrong. Mara's cryptic words came back to me. I realized I'd been walking in darkness. The streetlights were out. I turned around, confused, to see I'd passed half a dozen blown-out lights without noticing it. The storefronts, too, were vacant and dark. I wondered if I'd stumbled into some unfinished area. The sound of the wind had changed too. No, not the wind. The trees. Behind me, where the streetlight still worked, the trees stirred in the gentle breeze, but in the dark area, they stood perfectly still, as if frozen. I was already thinking of how to word this in the bug report when I realized I wasn't alone. Up ahead, leaning against a broken streetlight, was the shadow of a man. I walked towards him, hoping for some validation that he, too, was seeing the same thing. He was twitching strangely, as if caught in the throes of some spasm. For a moment, I thought of the tester at Roxy's, convulsing in pain. But no, this was different. This man was sobbing. The cold got in, the cold got in, the cold. I was about to ask if he needed help when the clouds parted, bathing us both in moonlight. My blood ran cold. The man was withered and emaciated, little more than a skeleton. He wore nothing but the same neoprene shorts and nylon harness we were all given in real life before entering the pods. The vertebrae of his spine jutted sickeningly against the pale glistening flesh of his back. In disbelief, I waved my holographic overlay. Nothing happened. I needed to know if this was real, if he was real. I waved again. I kept trying. He raised his head. Long strands of white wispy hair parted to reveal the same breathing apparatus we all wore. His bloodshot eyes opened wide with shock. They fixed on me with the same surprise and horror that I must have been reflecting back at him. I could hear his tortured breathing intensify. You shouldn't be here. He lunged towards me. His wet, freezing hands found my neck in a choking grasp. You need to wake up. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't scream, only panic. I tried to pry his hands off my throat, but they were too slick with the same goopy liquid from the pods. And that's when I noticed. That stupid tattoo. Death squirrel. A squirrel holding a katana in black ink. Mad Cow had gotten me so drunk at the launch party for our first game that he convinced me to get that thing. It was my own alter ego on my forearm, and there it was, blurry and faded but unmistakable on his skin and bones. He had my tattoo. I stared at his face even as I struggled to breathe. The recognition washed over me in a wave of cold terror that swept my sanity away. Suddenly, just for a moment, the sky was brighter than daytime. The abrupt brilliance stunned the creature, and it stared, horrified at the source beyond the horizon. No, it whimpered at the lingering glow of the explosion. I seized the moment and ran. As I did, a sound like the crack of thunder smashed through everything. More explosions burst across the horizon like lightning. Every illuminating flash revealed the town as something else. Shattered ruins, desolate, decayed. Its cries became an incoherent wail of rage and agony, and then disappeared entirely into the roaring boom. When at last I made it back to the well-lit area, the entire cacophony ceased. There was only the gentle sound of the breeze and a slight tinnitus in my ear. My overlay finally responded. I kept running and running. I found Mara on the rooftop deck of the tallest building in town. She was sitting on the ledge, smoking a cigarette. She greeted me without taking her eyes off the panorama of the town laid out before her. It didn't seem to faze her. She only faced me to refill her glass from a bottle resting beside her. Her wind-tousled hair framed that same pitying expression she wore at the bar. What was that thing? I demanded. She shrugged dismissively and turned away again. She seemed to be staring at the shadowy part of town I just fled from.
An anomaly.
She took a drag of her cigarette, then flicked ashes off the side of the roof. I took a deep breath, trying to contain my anger. Dr. Drost. Mara. I'm sleeping in one of your pods. I know you can revive me. She seemed to find this amusing, but there was something else crackling in her persona, as if she was trying to cope with something herself.
It's all so lifelike, isn't it? We had you testers to thank for that.
I felt a shortness of breath. I was beginning to feel dizzy, disassociated.
Because you're an instance too.
My thoughts flashed back to those long nights at Darkroom. Sitting at my desk, pacing the hallways, crashing on the couch in the break room, all the while strung out over the latest build of our game. The polished final product was the result of countless iteration. Meetings at the whiteboard, debugging, redesigning, again and again, version after version. That was just to make a video game. But something as complex as this place, how many versions had it taken to get this far? Dozens? Hundreds? Thousands? So you've murdered us, I said, confronting her gaze over and over again.
I suppose that's one way of looking at it.
There was nothing for me to do with all my anger and confusion. I decided to leave Mara alone and do the one thing I could, which was to march back to Roxy's and get mind-numbingly drunk as soon as possible. I was about to head downstairs when I remembered something and turned back to her. What did you say?
What?
It was her turn to look confused. You said there was no hell until we built it. She shook her head and looked again to the dark, static part of town.
The anomalies. You're not the first to see one, but I don't remember them.
She hung her head down and closed her eyes.
I should be able to remember. It's a sign the hardware's failing. Has been failing for some time.
Out past Mara's gaze, the dark patch of town seemed to grow larger, the ink-black tendrils of a desolation spreading from one street light to the next. The wind became chill, and with it came a distant sound, faint but familiar. I awoke in the middle of the street. A sharp pain pierced my lung. The cold got in, I said to myself. My own voice sounded different, older, raspier. I calmly looked around at the familiar street and noticed a young kid. Do you need help? Half of me wanted to jump up and wring his neck for asking such a dumb question. Okay, I am you, and you are me. He looked at me with a blank expression. I could see the gears churning in his mind. Did you hear me? You are me. I am you, I said again. Yeah, right, he managed to spit out. I held up my arm to reveal the tattoo. No way. No, this is a bug, a replicant. You're a bug. You're an AGI or something. He swiped his hand to open his menu. Simultaneously, the thunder began. Here it comes. Here, what comes? He said, closing the menu. The anomaly. Okay, listen, you and I are stuck in a loop. And in this loop, I usually attack you. Then you run like a dog with your tail between your legs. Then you, or I, tell Mara, and the cycle repeats. The thunder was growing closer. What is that? I grabbed him by the shoulder. Listen, the vibrations coming out of my mouth are telling you something. Listen to me. We can't run. He shook free of my grasp, ran full speed away from the darkness, slipped on the ice, and cracked his head open. I am an idiot, I chuckled inside. I turned to face the noise. A pitch blackness was growing closer towards me, as if someone was replacing chunks of the game world. I sat down, cross-legged, and began repeating a phrase in my mind. It was a speech recognition phrase based on Sanskrit. Mad Cow implemented it into all of our early games. In effect, if a player were to say this phrase while inside a darkroom game, it would instantly shut down for that user. A sort of safe valve that Lucas had the idea for after he returned from a vacation and after watching Sword Art Online. At the time, I thought he was paranoid, but here and now, I was thanking him. Liquid oxygen filled my lungs. My ears began ringing. I opened my eyes to a blurry green hue. I needed air. Liquid came out, air came in. It felt like being reborn. I could barely lift myself out of the liquid. My muscles were non-existent. I managed to lean my body over the lid of the pod and crawled out halfway. My hand slipped on the side of the glass, and I dropped. My hip bone broke on impact. Then silence.
Good evening, testers. The time is now 7 p.m. on April 2nd, 2233. FCI wishes you a well-rested night.